Orwell's novel is divided into 3 parts and is set in the near future, 1984. The world is divided into 3 macro nations that compete in what is called the Third World War. These superstates are Oceania, which are made up of North and South America, the United Kingdom and Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Eurasia, which is made up of Europe and Russia, and East Asia, which is made up of the territories of Japan, China, Tibet, and northern India. The remaining territory extends from north-central Africa to the Middle East and Southeast Asia. The story takes place in London, the capital of Oceania, governed by a socialist regime based on the ideals of INGSOC, which is the acronym for English Socialism. Power is ruled by a single party, which has no rivals in the opposition, headed by Big Brother, a charismatic figure that no one has ever seen and who is represented with the reminiscence of the features of Stalin and Hitler. The life of the inhabitants of Oceania is constantly monitored by cameras, called telescreens, which are present in every home and in every part of the city. These are the tools with which power continuously spreads its propaganda and controls citizens even in their homes, ensuring total control over their lives. Power is divided between different entities. The Ministry of Love, or Mean Love, which deals with internal security through its political police, called Thought Police, and the conversion of anyone who behaves deviantly from the regime's creed. The Ministry of Peace, Minipax, which actually deals with war. The Ministry of Abundance, Mini Plenty, which deals with economic matters. And the Ministry of Truth, Mini-True, which deals with party propaganda, according to a historical revisionism that leads to the modification of books, news, and newspapers of the past to support the current positions of the government. Society is rigidly organized into classes, while all are members of the party. On the one hand, there are high-ranking officials who make up the internal party. On the other, the lowest hierarchies of the system, which make up the external party. Underneath them all is the working class, prolets who live in separate neighborhoods and engage in manual labor. The language has been changed in newspeak to avoid any form of free thought. Consequently, all works of invention are prohibited and are from the new vocabulary. All words and thoughts not in line with the directives of the party are excluded. Anything that is censored is labeled and punished as crimethink. The protagonist, Winston Smith, is a low-ranking official of the external party who works at the Ministry of Truth. Here, Winston modifies texts, books, and photos of the past, altering the truth and recreating another one more suited to the wishes of the party. Winston, despite the appearances of his daily existence, represents the rigid doctrine and the nagging presence of the regime, and is aware, precisely by virtue of the work he does, of the mystifications in which a large part of the population is held. Winston, who has no family and no affections, also has the opportunity to ascertain the miserable living conditions of the proletarian class, which is however less controlled by the organs of the psychopolice. As a form of personal rebellion, Winston has started writing a diary in which he brings together all his criticisms of the party and the reality in which he is forced to live. This activity is in itself very dangerous, because it is a manifestation of free will and free thinking, and cannot be controlled by the government's propaganda and mind control strategy. The protagonist is in fact forced to write his pages hidden in the only corner of the house where the television screen cannot record him. Winston, disillusioned with the possibilities of changing the situation, is then obsessed with the figure of that O'Brien, a powerful exponent of the internal party whom the protagonist suspects is a spy for the Brotherhood, a mysterious secret organization that is allegedly plotting against the Sosing. Winston's situation changes during a demonstration, called 2 Minutes Hate, organized by the party against Emmanuel Goldstein, a sworn enemy of the government, on which the repressed anger of the population is unloaded. Here, Winston meets Julia, a beautiful 26-year-old girl who also works at the Mini-True, but is openly hostile towards the government. Winston initially suspects Julia of being a spy for the Thought Police, despite being attracted to her. However, one day Julia delivers Winston a paper note, on which there is only the sentence, "I love you." Thus begins the relationship between the two protagonists. The more dangerous, the more regime prohibits sex, considering it functional exclusively to the procreation and composition of a family. The two lovers, therefore, after fleeting encounters in isolated places in the countryside, decide to rent a room without a television screen in the proletarian sector of the city from Mr. Charrington, who apparently shares opposition to the party with them, and which he has already sold to Winston his secret diary. The clandestine relationship with Julia feeds Winston's ideological aversion to INGSOC. If, however, Julia sees a future of freedom in front of her, the protagonist is more certain and doubtful. A turning point is represented by the return to the scene of O'Brien, who summons Winston and Julia to his luxurious apartment, reserved only for members of the internal party. O'Brien, for whom Winston has ambivalent feelings from fear to admiration, reveals that he is in fact a member of the Brotherhood, and that he is working for the collapse of the Ingsoc. In fact, he delivers to the two protagonists Goldstein's secret book, Theory and Practice of Oligarchic Collectivism, from which Julia and Winston learn the guidelines of a future society based on class principles. In reality, O'Brien is an emissary of the thought police, as is Mr. Charrington. Winston and Julia are thus arrested red-handed in their room and taken to the Ministry by Love, where they are separated and barbarously tortured by O'Brien himself. In addition to physical violence, the party also resorts to psychological conditioning, according to the logic of the doublethink, for which it is necessary to learn to support at the same time opposing ideas and theses, in order to always be faithful to the orthodoxy of the party and to his work of removing the past. The doublethink is divided into three phases of learning, understanding, and acceptance, which culminates in the complete brainwashing of the victim, and therefore in the construction of an alternative and more comfortably acceptable truth. Winston strenuously resists physical torture so as not to betray Julia, but capitulates when, after months, he is led by O'Brien to the famous Room 101, where his greatest fear awaits him: rats. Terrified, physically and psychologically exhausted, he betrays Julia. O'Brien, having induced the protagonist to renounce all his values and to denounce the woman he loves, has achieved his goal. Winston is thus reintegrated into the civilized world, being now a devoted and faithful servant of Big Brother. When he meets Julia in a park, the two lovers confess that they have betrayed each other to escape torture. Winston realizes he no longer has feelings for her. Although troubled by the surfacing of memories of the past, which the protagonist is now convinced to be false, Winston is now unable to react to mass homologation. When the news of an important military success of Oceania in the war with Africa reaches him in a bar, Winston rejoices in the greatness of Big Brother and the love he has for him.